You know what's strange about paradise? How quiet people get when you ask the wrong questions. I've spent weeks diving into Alola's lore, peeling back layers of sunlit beaches and cheerful island trials. And what I found underneath? Well, it's not exactly what the tourism board wants you to see. We've talked about the Ultra Beast before, those alien horrors that slip through dimensional cracks to wreak havoc on an unsuspecting region. But here's the thing. The Ultra Beasts are outsiders, invaders, the real terror in Alola. It's been there all along, it never left. Even the people who live there, they know better than to speak its name carelessly. I'm talking about the Tapu, the 4 guardian deities of Alola: Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Tapu Bulu, and Tapu Fini. You've probably caught them, fought them, maybe even used them in competitive battles. But have you ever stopped to ask, why does an entire region live in fear of its own protectors? Why do the people of Alola build shrines and offer prayers not out of love, but out of desperate primal need to stay on the good side of something that could erase them on a whim? What kind of guardians destroy entire villages because someone built a supermarket on the wrong patch of dirt? Today we're going deep. Forget everything you think you know about these cute legendary Pokemon. We're going to examine what the Pokédex entries really say, what the environmental storytelling reveals, and what the people of Alola actually believe when they whisper about the Tapu in the dark. This isn't a story about heroes. This is a story about old gods who never truly left, and a region that survives only because it knows when to bow its head. Think of this as folk horror in paradise, because in Alola the sun always shines, but the shadows never quite disappear. Let me start with something you probably remember from your playthrough but might not have questioned. Early in Sun and Moon, you're on the Mahalo Trail. You and Lily are on that rickety bridge when it collapses. You're falling, Nebby's in danger, and then Tapu Koko appears. It saves you. The guardian deity of Malevolent Island swoops in, carries you to safety, and even gifts you a Z-ring made from a sparkling stone. Wow, what a benevolent protector, right? Your first interaction with the Tapu sets the tone for the whole game. These are your friends, your allies, the good guys. Except, look closer. Tapu Koko didn't save you because it cared about you. It saved you because it was curious. The Pokédex is explicit about this. Tapu Koko is described as fickle, unpredictable, and driven by curiosity rather than compassion. It will not necessarily help people in need. Let that sink in for a moment. This is the deity that an entire island worships, and its own documentation admits it might just watch you die if it's not feeling particularly interested that day. And that hair-triggered temper? The Moon Pokédex. Entry says Tapu Koko has a hair-triggered temper, but forgets what made it angry an instant later. In Ultra Sun, it gets worse. The entry explicitly states that if you put Tapu Koko in a bad mood, it will become a malevolent deity and attack. Malevolent. That's the word they chose. Not angry, not aggressive. Malevolent. This thing is worshipped by thousands of people who live in constant awareness that their guardian could turn on them at any moment for any reason. And the only mercy they'd receive is that it might forget why it killed them before their bodies hit the ground. You start to see the pattern, don't you? The people of Alola don't worship the Tapu because they love them. They worship them because they're terrified of what happens if they don't. And Tapu Koko, for all its prominence in the early game, is just the beginning of this nightmare. Let's talk about Tapu Lele. Tapu Lele is the guardian of Akala Island. Its shell resembles a butterfly, all pink and delicate and pretty. It's associated with healing, with life, with the ruins of life where existence begins. The first time Ash encounters it in the anime, it heals a scratch on his hand by scattering glowing scales on him. How sweet, how gentle, what a kind protector. And then you read the rest of the lore, and you realize that Tapu Lele might be the most disturbing of the four. See, Tapu Lele's healing scales do work. They stimulate the body, close wounds, cure ailments. But the Pokédex is very, very careful to add a qualifier. These scales are dangerous if too many are touched at once. What does that mean? What happens if you absorb too much of Tapu Lele's gift? The game doesn't give you specifics, but the Sun and Moon website mentions that overexposure to the scales can be harmful. Harmful. That's the word they use when they don't want to tell you that your body will tear itself apart. Think about it. Tapu Lele scales stimulate your body's functions. They accelerate healing, boost your immune system, flood your cells with energy. Now imagine that process continuing past the point of healing. Imagine your cells multiplying too quickly. Imagine your heart beating faster and faster until it ruptures. Imagine your nervous system firing on overdrive until your brain can't process the pain anymore. That's what happens when a god gives you too much of a good thing. In Tapu Lele, it scatters these scales for its own amusement. The Pokédex calls it cruel, not careless, not indifferent. Cruel. It says Tapu Lele is sometimes described as cruel for the way it weakens others as it scatters its scales for its own amusement. This thing is laughing while it does it. In the anime, we see Tapu Lele challenge Ash's Rockruff to a battle and proceed to beat the poor creature within an inch of its life, all while giggling with childlike glee. It doesn't understand its own strength. It doesn't recognize the line between play and slaughter. Or maybe it does, and it just doesn't care. And here's where it gets even darker. There's an old legend in Alola about a war between the islands. Tapu Lele supposedly ended this war by healing the tired warriors with its scales. But some accounts, the game tells us, point to a more disturbing truth behind this story. What truth? What really happened? The game doesn't say. But let's think about it logically. Warriors on both sides, exhausted, wounded, desperate for relief. Tapu Lele descends and scatters its scales across the battlefield. At first they feel better. Their wounds close. Their strength returns. They feel invincible. And then the scales don't stop working. The healing doesn't stop. Their bodies begin to betray them, cells multiplying uncontrollably, organs shutting down from the strain. Maybe they didn't die immediately. Maybe it took hours, days. Maybe they begged for death long before it came. And maybe that's why the war ended. Not because Tapu Lele healed anyone, but because both sides looked at what it had done and realized that angering the Tapu would bring something far worse than defeat in battle. The Guardian Deities earned the title Nature Incarnate. They're called that because they embody the fundamental truth of the natural world. Nature isn't good, nature isn't evil, nature simply is. It will give you rain to grow your crops and then wash away your village in a flood. It will provide you with fruit and then poison you with its leaves. It will heal you and then kill you, often in the same breath. That's what Tapu Lele represents. The beautiful, terrible indifference of life itself. People avoid Tapu Lele. The Pokédex mentions that most Pokémon typically avoid the Guardians unless they're strong enough to face them. Even the wildlife knows to stay away. And yet, the people of Akala Island worship it. They built the ruins of life as a shrine to this butterfly-shaped nightmare. They bring offerings, they pray for its blessing, because they know that not worshipping it would be far, far worse. Tapu Lele has been described as devoid of guilt. It has no moral compass, no sense of right and wrong. It simply does what amuses it, and if that means scattering scales that could melt your insides while you're still conscious enough to feel it, well, that's just the nature of nature. Now let's talk about what happens when you build on sacred ground. Let's talk about Tapu Bulu. Tapu Bulu is the guardian of Ula Ula Island. It resembles a bull, appropriately enough, with wooden horns and a grass-type association that ties it to agriculture and abundance. Its home is in the ruins of Abundance, located in the middle of the Haina Desert, and right next to those ruins, there's a place called Tapu Village, or what's left of it, because Tapu Bulu destroyed it. When you arrive at Tapu Village, you're struck immediately by how wrong it feels. This isn't a thriving community, it's a graveyard. Ruined buildings line the streets, their walls cracked and crumbling, their roofs caved in. Most of the structures are uninhabitable. The only functioning building is the Pokemon Center, standing alone like a desperate beacon of civilization in a wasteland. The population of Tapu Village is 13 people. 13. The smallest town in Alola, and everyone who lives there does so because they have nowhere else to go, or because they've been assigned to maintain the Pokemon Center for travelers heading to Mount Lanakila. What happened here? Why is Tapu Village in ruins? The locals will tell you, though they speak in hushed tones, as if saying it too loudly might summon the deity's wrath again. Years ago, someone decided to build a thrifty megamart near Tapu Village. It was just a supermarket, a place for people to buy groceries, supplies, everyday necessities. Innocent enough, right? Except the supermarket was built on ground that Tapu Bulu considered sacred. And Tapu Bulu does not forgive trespasses. The Guardian Deity went into a rage. It uprooted massive trees with its bare hands, swung them like clubs, and laid waste to everything in its path. The thrifty megamart was obliterated. Tapu Village was collateral damage. Buildings were smashed to rubble. The destruction was absolute. And here's the part that the game doesn't explicitly say, but strongly implies. People died. Of course people died. You don't level an entire village and have everyone walk away unscathed. The game is a Pokemon title, so they can't show you corpses or tell you directly about casualties. But look at the evidence. The thrifty megamart is now an abandoned site, overrun by ghost-type Pokemon, Haunter, Ghastly, Gengar, Spirits. Why are there so many ghosts in a place that was destroyed by a grass-type deity? Because ghosts don't just appear randomly. They're drawn to places of death, to locations where the boundary between the living and the dead has been violently torn open. The thrifty megamart isn't just abandoned, it's haunted. And the trial that takes place there, where you have to photograph ghost types using the Poke Finder, is Acerola's trial. Acerola, who specializes in ghost types and has an uncanny connection to the spirits of the dead. She knows what happened there. The trial itself is a form of memorial, a way of acknowledging the tragedy without speaking it aloud. You're sent in to confront the ghosts, to face the totem Mimikyu that lurks in the ruins. Mimikyu, a Pokemon that disguises itself to avoid being seen, that desperately wants to be loved but is too broken to show its true form. Even the totem Pokemon of this place embodies the trauma of what Tapu Bulu did. This wasn't just property damage, this was a massacre. And the people of Alola learned a lesson that day. Do not build on sacred ground. Do not disrespect the Tapu, because they will kill you and they will not feel guilty about it. Tapu Bulu is described in the Pokédex as lazy, passive. It has a peaceful disposition and rings the bell on its tail to let others know where it is, avoiding unnecessary conflicts. But when it's offended, when someone crosses a line it has decided is uncrossable, it becomes merciless. The Pokédex says it once repelled thieves from its ruins by swinging trees like clubs. Repelled. What a polite way to say murdered. And Tapu Village stands as a permanent reminder of what happens when you forget that the Tapu are not your friends. They are forces of nature wearing a friendly mask, and nature does not care if you meant no harm. There's a reporter in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon who wants to interview Tapu Bulu if you have it in your party. She wants to ask it about the destruction of Tapu Village. The game treats this as a lighthearted moment, a funny little side quest, but think about what that implies. A journalist is trying to get a statement from a deity that slaughtered countless people because a building was in the wrong spot. And the deity, if you complete the interview, gives you a grassy seed as a reward, a gift, a token of appreciation for letting it tell its side of the story. No remorse, no acknowledgement of the lives lost. Just, here's a seed, thanks for listening. Tapu Bulu's Pokédex entry in Ultramoon says, although it's called a guardian deity, it's violent enough to crush anyone it sees as an enemy. Violent enough to crush, not defeat, not overpower, crush. This thing will physically grind you into the dirt if you displease it, and the people of Ula Ula Island are so deeply, intimately aware of this fact that they worship it with the kind of reverence you'd reserve for a bomb that might detonate at any moment. They don't love Tapu Bulu, they fear it. And fear in Alola is the only rational response to divinity. And then there's Tapu Fini, the loneliest, most aloof of the four, and perhaps the most dangerous. Tapu Fini is the guardian of Pony Island. It resembles a swordfish or marlin when its shell is closed, but when it opens, it reveals a mermaid-like body that manipulates water with terrifying ease. Tapu Fini is worshipped as the guardian of life's end, residing in the ruins of hope, which is actually a mistranslation. In Japanese, the ruins are called the ruins of Heigen, referencing a Buddhist concept of the boundary between life and death. Tapu Fini doesn't guard hope, it guards the threshold to the afterlife. And it uses mist to blur the line between the living and the dead. The mist, oh the mist, Tapu Fini's most iconic ability, and the one that makes it truly nightmarish. When Tapu Fini creates mist, it doesn't just obscure vision, it creates a mental fog, a self-destructive trance that turns people's minds against themselves. Sailors who encounter the mist have been known to crash their ships onto rocks. Travelers who wander into it lose their sense of direction and walk in circles until they collapse from exhaustion. And the worst part, Tapu Fini uses this power deliberately. It tests those who seek its favor, trapping them in the mist to see if they're strong enough to resist the pull of their own despair. In the anime, we see Tapu Fini create a mist that allows people to see and speak with the spirits of their dead loved ones. Mallow reunites with her deceased mother. Ash's Taurus hat sees its old mentor, Stoutland. It seems like a gift, doesn't it? A chance to say goodbye, to find closure. But Hapu, the newly appointed Kahuna of Pony Island, is terrified. She warns that people can become trapped in the mist forever, unable to let go of the dead, unable to return to the world of the living. The mist preys on grief. It takes your pain and turns it into chains. And Tapu Fini watches, emotionless, as people tear themselves apart trying to hold on to ghosts. This is the deity that creates purifying water, water that's supposed to cleanse the body and soul. But the water isn't free. You have to prove yourself worthy first. You have to survive the mist. You have to endure the psychological torture of confronting your deepest regrets and walking away. And if you fail, if you can't withstand the test, Tapu Fini doesn't save you. It lets you drown in your own memories, trapped in a fog of your own making, until your body gives out and you become another ghost for the next fool to encounter. Tapu Fini is described as disgusted by humans. It actively avoids contact with people, hiding itself in thick fog and only appearing when it deems someone worthy of testing. And even then, even if you pass its trial, there's no guarantee it will help you. The Pokédex says Tapu Fini is willing to help those who prove themselves worthy, but it also warns that terrible calamities sometimes befall those who recklessly approach it. Terrible calamities, shipwrecks, drownings, madness, the kind of calamities that look like accidents to outsiders, but are recognized by the people of Alola as divine punishment. Tapu Fini's connection to the underworld, to death, to the boundary between worlds, makes it fundamentally different from the other Tapu. Tapu Koko is violent but forgetful. Tapu Lele is cruel but childlike. Tapu Bulu is passive but vengeful. But Tapu Fini is patient. It doesn't need to lash out in anger. It simply waits. It knows that everyone eventually will come to it, because everyone dies. And when you die, when you cross that threshold, Tapu Fini will be there, and it will decide whether you deserve peace or torment. The people of Pony Island don't worship Tapu Fini out of love. They worship it out of dread, because they know that when their time comes, they will face this deity, and it will judge them with the cold, dispassionate gaze of the ocean itself. No mercy, no compassion, just the inexorable pull of the tide, dragging you under whether you're ready or not. Now let's zoom out. Let's talk about what the Tapu represent as a collective, because these aren't just 4 random legendaries. They're a system, a theology, a way of understanding the world that the people of Alola have lived with for generations. The 4 Tapu are each associated with a stage of life. Tapu Koko represents conflict, the ruins of conflict, where life is tested. It's the deity of struggle, of survival, of proving your worth through battle. Tapu Lele represents life itself, the ruins of life, where existence begins. It's the deity of healing and growth, but also of the chaotic, uncontrollable force of life that can turn deadly without warning. Tapu Bulu represents abundance, the ruins of abundance, where life flourishes. It's the deity of harvest and prosperity, but also of territorial rage when that abundance is threatened. And Tapu Fini represents hope, or rather, the ruins of hope, where life ends and the soul moves on. It's the deity of death, of transition, of the mist that separates the living from the dead. Together, the 4 Tapu form a complete narrative of human existence. You are born into conflict, you struggle to survive. If you're strong enough, you thrive and build a life. And then you die, and your soul is judged. Every stage of this journey is overseen by a deity that could kill you at any moment. The Tapu are not protectors in the way that most legendaries are. They're not benevolent guardians who swoop in to save the day. They're forces of nature, personified and given consciousness, and they operate according to their own rules, their own logic, their own whims. The Hawaiian mythology that inspired the Tapu makes this even clearer. The 4 major Hawaiian gods, Ku, Kane, Lono, and Kanaloa, are powerful, essential to the functioning of the world, and absolutely not to be trifled with. Q, the god of war, demands human sacrifices. Cain, the god of creation, is the supreme deity, but can be wrathful when disrespected. Lono, the god of agriculture, brings both abundance and destructive storms. Kanaloa, the god of the ocean and the underworld, controls the boundary between life and death. These gods are worshipped not because they're kind, but because they're powerful. And the people who worship them understood that you don't love a hurricane, you respect it, you prepare for it, and you pray it doesn't decide to destroy you. The Tapu embody this same philosophy. They're not evil, they're not malicious in the way that Team Rocket or Team Galactic are malicious. They're simply inhuman. They operate on a scale and according to principles that we, as mortals, cannot fully comprehend. And the people of Alola have learned to live with that. They've built a culture around it. The Island Challenge, the Grand Trials, the Kahunas, all of it is designed to honor the Tapu, to keep them appeased, to avoid provoking them. Because here's the thing, the Tapu are the only reason Alola still exists. They defended the region from the Ultra Beasts. They fought against Necrozma, the Blinding One, and drove it back. They protected the islands when no one else could. But that protection comes with a price. The people of Alola survive because the Tapu allow them to survive. And the Tapu could at any moment decide that the people are no longer worth protecting. That's the unspoken truth behind every festival, every prayer, every offering. The Tapu are not your friends, they are your landlords. And you pay rent in worship and obedience, or you get evicted in the most violent way possible. Think about the festivals. Tapu Koko watches the battles at Iki Town, the opening ceremony of the Island Challenge. The game presents this as a fun tradition, a way to honor the deity by showing its strong trainers. But what happens if the battles aren't entertaining enough? What if Tapu Koko gets bored? Does it leave peacefully, or does it decide to make the battles more interesting by joining in uninvited? The fact that the entire island holds its breath during these festivals, hoping that Tapu Koko will be pleased, tells you everything you need to know. Or consider the Kahunas. The 4 island Kahunas are chosen by the Tapu themselves. Hala by Tapu Koko, Olivia by Tapu Lele, Nanu by Tapu Bulu, and eventually Hapu by Tapu Fini. This sounds like an honor, doesn't it? To be personally selected by a guardian deity to lead your island. But look at the Kahunas, really look at them. Hala carries the weight of tradition on his shoulders and takes his role with deadly seriousness. Olivia is constantly vigilant, aware that her island's prosperity depends on maintaining Tapu Lele's favor. Nanu is exhausted, bitter, worn down by the responsibility of serving a deity he doesn't even like. And Hapu is terrified, a child given an impossible task because a god decided she was worthy. Being a Kahuna isn't an honor, it's a burden. It's a life sentence of service to a being that could kill you on a whim. And the people chosen for this role know it. They accept it because refusing would be worse. Because if a Tapu chooses you and you say no, what do you think happens? Do you think the deity just shrugs and picks someone else? Or do you think it takes your refusal as an insult, a rejection of its divine will, and responds accordingly? The Kahunas are hostages, not leaders. They're the intermediaries between the people and the gods, and their primary job is to keep the gods from wiping everyone out. That's not mythology. That's not metaphor. That's the literal truth of what it means to live in Alola. You survive at the pleasure of forces that have no reason to care whether you live or die. And the scariest part? This is normal. This is how it's always been. The people of Alola have grown up with this dynamic. They've internalized it. They don't question it because questioning the Tapu would be suicidal. Instead, they've built an entire society around the principle that the gods are capricious, dangerous, and essential. They teach their children to respect the Tapu, to avoid angering them, to offer prayers and gifts and gratitude even when they don't feel grateful, because the alternative is unthinkable. This is folk horror at its finest, not monsters hiding in the dark, but gods standing in the light, smiling while they hold a knife behind their backs. Not a creeping evil that invades from outside, but a fundamental wrongness woven into the fabric of daily life. The sun always shines in Alola, the beaches are beautiful, the people are friendly, and underneath it all, there's a quiet, constant terror that no one talks about but everyone feels. Because the Tapu are watching, and they always will be. Let's talk about scale for a moment. Because when you play Pokemon Sun and Moon, the Tapu feel small. You battle them after becoming champion. They're level 60 at most. You catch them with a quick ball if you're lucky. They become just another entry in your Pokédex, another Mon to use in competitive battles. The games have to do this, of course. You can't have an enemy that's genuinely unbeatable. But lore-wise, the Tapu are apocalyptic. These are beings that fought Necrozma. Necrozma, the creature that absorbs light, that devoured the sun of an entire dimension, that required the combined power of Solgaleo or Lunala to even slow down. The Tapu fought this thing. They fought it to a standstill. They defended Alola from an entity that could have plunged the entire region into eternal darkness. And they won. Not easily, not without cost, but they won. That's the kind of power we're talking about. That's what the people of Alola live under. Deities capable of fighting cosmic horrors, and those same deities can decide to level your village because you built a building in the wrong spot. The Guardian Deities have a shared signature move called Nature's Madness. It deals damage equal to half of your current HP, no matter what. You could be at full health with maxed out defenses, and Nature's Madness will still cut you down to half. It's unstoppable, it's inevitable, and it's explicitly described as drawing power from nature itself, from the fundamental forces of the world. This isn't a Pokemon move in the traditional sense. This is reality warping. This is the Tapu imposing their will on existence and existence obeying, because it has no choice. In their Z move, Guardian of Alola, is even worse. When a Tapu uses this move, it summons a giant, headless humanoid figure made of pure energy. The Tapu then attaches itself to this figure, becoming its head, and the figure slams its massive fist down on the opponent with enough force to reduce their HP to a quarter of its original value. This move ignores durability. It doesn't matter how tough you are, how many shields you put up, how much you resist. Guardian of Alola will reduce you to a fourth of your strength. And the visual design of this attack is haunting. The headless giant. The detached mechanical way it moves. The sheer overwhelming scale of it. This isn't a Pokemon using a technique. This is a god demonstrating its dominance. Now imagine being a normal person in Alola. Not a trainer with a team of powerful Pokemon. Not the champion. Just someone living your life, trying to make ends meet, raising your family. And you know that if you step out of line, if you disrespect the Tapu, they can call down this kind of power on you. No trial, no warning, just instant judgment. How do you live with that? How do you go about your day knowing that divine retribution is always one mistake away? You do what the people of Alola do. You pray. You make offerings. You follow the traditions even when you don't understand them. You teach your children to bow their heads when they pass a shrine. You never ever build on sacred ground. You avoid the ruins unless you have a very good reason to be there. You don't question the Kahunas. You don't speak ill of the Tapu. You keep your head down and hope that you're never interesting enough to catch their attention. Because the Tapu are bored. That's the really terrifying part. They're immortal, or close to it. They've been around for centuries, watching generations of humans live and die. And they're curious. They want stimulation. Tapu Koko challenges trainers to battles for fun. Tapu Lele scatters its scales to see what happens. Tapu Bulu demolishes villages and then goes back to sleep. Tapu Fini traps people in mist to test their resolve. These aren't acts of malice. These are acts of entertainment. The Tapu are playing, and we're the toys. Think about the implications of that. Every time a trainer catches a Tapu, it's not because they overpowered it. It's because the Tapu decided to let itself be caught. It was curious about you. It wanted to see what you would do. And when it gets bored, it can leave whenever it wants. The Pokeball isn't a prison for a Tapu. It's a temporary amusement. They're humoring you. And that's somehow more disturbing than if they were genuinely hostile. There's a scene in the anime where Tapu Koko battles Ash in an exhibition match during the Alola League. The entire stadium watches as this legendary deity fights a 10-year-old boy's Pikachu. And when Pikachu wins, when Tapu Koko faints and collapses, the crowd goes silent. Not because they're sad, but because they're terrified. They've just watched their guardian deity lose. What happens now? Will it be angry? Will it destroy the stadium in revenge? Will it take Ash's victory as an insult and punish the entire region? It doesn't. Tapu Lele heals it with its scales, and Tapu Koko thanks Kukui for the battle and flies away peacefully. The crowd breathes a collective sigh of relief, but that moment of silence, that pause where everyone held their breath, that's the truth of living in Alola. You never know when the Tapu will turn on you. You never know when their curiosity will shift to anger. You just hope that when they do inevitably hurt you, they'll forget about it quickly and move on. This is what paradise looks like when the gods never left. This is what it means to live in a world where nature is personified and given the ability to choose cruelty. The Tapu aren't evil. Evil would be easier to deal with. Evil can be fought, reasoned with, understood. The Tapu are something far more primal. They're the embodiment of the old pact between humans and the natural world. We give them respect. We offer them worship. We follow their rules. And in return, they allow us to exist. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes a village gets destroyed because someone built a supermarket. Sometimes a person touches too many healing scales and their body tears itself apart. Sometimes a sailor vanishes into the mist and is never seen again. Sometimes a trainer catches Tapu Koko's attention and gets blessed with a Z-ring. And sometimes that same trainer does something that offends Tapu Koko, and it becomes a malevolent deity and attacks. There's no logic to it, no justice, no fairness, just the whims of beings who exist on a plane of understanding we can't reach. And the people of Alola have accepted this. They've built their entire civilization around it. The island challenge isn't just a rite of passage, it's a ritual, a way of proving to the Tapu that the new generation is strong enough to survive. The grand trials aren't just battles, they're offerings, demonstrations of worth, pleas for continued protection. And the Z-rings, those sparkling stones that the Tapu give to chosen trainers, Those aren't gifts, they're marks. They're ways of saying, I'm watching you, I find you interesting, entertain me. Every time you use a Z move, you're drawing on the power of the Tapu, channeling their divine energy through your own Pokemon. You're borrowing their strength, and borrowed things must always be returned. What do you think happens to trainers who fail to live up to the Tapu's expectations? What happens to Kahunas who can't maintain order on their islands? What happens to anyone who takes the Tapu's blessings for granted? The games don't show you, but the ruins do. The ruins of Tapu Village, the haunted corridors of the thrifty Megamart, the mist-shrouded shores of Pony Island. These places are monuments to the Tapu's wrath, silent testaments to what happens when you forget your place. And that's the core of folk horror, isn't it? The realization that you never had control, that the world you thought was safe is actually a thin layer of civilization stretched over something ancient and hungry and utterly indifferent to your suffering. That the rituals you perform, the traditions you follow, the prayers you offer, they're not guarantees of safety. They're just ways of delaying the inevitable, because the gods will do what they will do, and you can either bow your head and hope for mercy, or you can rage against them and be destroyed. Alola is paradise, but paradise has always had a serpent in the garden, and in Alola, the serpent is worshipped. Let me tell you about the strange souvenir. It's a key item you can obtain in earlier Pokemon games before Sun and Moon were even released. It's described as an ornament depicting a Pokemon from the Alola region. When Sun and Moon came out, fans discovered that this souvenir was actually a carving of Tapu Bulu. It had been there all along in previous games, hinting at what was coming. But here's what makes it interesting. The description says it's a souvenir, something people bring back from their travels, something they display in their homes as a reminder of their vacation. Now think about that. People in the Pokemon world visit Alola, they see the ruins, they hear the stories, and they buy little statues of Tapu Bulu to take home with them. Why? Because to outsiders, the Tapu are exotic. They're interesting. They're part of the local color, like buying a tiki statue in Hawaii. These tourists don't understand what they're looking at. They don't comprehend that these aren't cute cultural icons. They're representations of entities that could and have killed people for arbitrary reasons. It's the disconnect between how the rest of the world sees Alola and how the people of Alola experience it. To outsiders, it's a tropical paradise with fun traditions and powerful legendary Pokemon. To locals, it's a region where you live at the mercy of capricious gods who might decide tomorrow that your existence offends them. The tourists take their selfies at the ruins of conflict. They battle at Iki Town and think it's charming that there's a festival. They catch the Tapu if they're strong enough and add them to their teams. But the people who actually live there, they know better. They see the tourists and they don't warn them, because what would they say? Don't catch Tapu Koko, it might kill you later. Don't take pictures at the ruins, you're standing on sacred ground. That supermarket we're rebuilding, the last one was destroyed by an angry god, so we're being very careful about where we put this one. They can't say any of that, because admitting the truth would mean admitting that their entire way of life is built on fear. And who wants to admit that? So they smile, they sell the souvenirs, they welcome the tourists, and guide them through the island challenge and collect their money. And when the tourists leave, when they board their boats and planes and head back to Kanto or Johto or Hoenn, the locals breathe a sigh of relief, because tourists attract attention, and attention from the Tapu is the last thing anyone wants. This creates a strange dual reality in Alola. There's the Alola that visitors see, the bright and cheerful tropical paradise where everyone is friendly, and the legendary Pokemon are just another part of the adventure. And then there's the Alola that exists when the tourists leave, the one where people whisper prayers before going to sleep, where parents tell their children to stay away from certain areas without explaining why, where the Kahunas carry the weight of an entire island's survival on their shoulders. It's this duality that makes the Tapu so effective as folk horror antagonists. They're hiding in plain sight. Everyone knows about them. They're not a secret. But the truth of what they are, the reality of their nature, is obscured by layers of cultural tourism and game mechanics. The Pokédex gives you hints. The environmental storytelling shows you ruins and graveyards. The anime depicts their cruelty in small doses, but it's all sanitized, all presented in a way that doesn't fully convey the existential dread of living under the watch of beings who could annihilate you for reasons you'll never understand. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the games can't show you the full horror because it would be too much. Because if they really depicted what it means to live in Alola, if they showed you the bodies in the ruins of the thrifty Megamart, if they had NPCs talk openly about the fear that permeates every aspect of their lives, if they made the Tapu as genuinely threatening as the lore suggests, it wouldn't be a Pokemon game anymore. It would be something else entirely. But the threads are there, the pieces are all present. You just have to look for them. And once you see them, once you understand what the Tapu really are, you can never look at Alola the same way again. That cheerful music playing in the background, it's whistling past the graveyard. Those smiling NPCs, they're performing for an audience of gods. That beautiful sunset over the ocean, it's the same ocean that Tapu Fini uses to drag people into the underworld. Every moment of peace in Alola is conditional. Every smile is nervous. Every prayer is desperate. Because the people know, they've always known, and they've built an entire society around the principle that if you're careful, if you're respectful, if you're lucky, maybe the Tapu won't notice you. Maybe you'll live your entire life without attracting their attention. Maybe you'll die of old age in your bed instead of being crushed by a tree-wielding bull god, or dissolving from the inside out because you touched too many healing scales, or drowning in a mist that shows you everyone you've ever lost. Maybe, but probably not. Because the Tapu are curious, and curiosity, when wielded by gods, is the most dangerous force in the world. They want to see what you'll do. They want to test you. They want to know if you're strong, if you're worthy, if you're interesting, and if you are, they might bless you. They might give you power, make you a Kahuna, grant you a Zed ring, save you from falling off a bridge, but that blessing comes with a target on your back, because once the Tapu notice you, they never stop watching, and the moment you disappoint them, the moment you stop being interesting, the moment you make a mistake, well, just ask the people of Tapu Village how that worked out for them. There's a reason the population is 13. There's a reason the buildings are still in ruins decades later. There's a reason no one has tried to rebuild properly. Because rebuilding would mean starting over. It would mean trying again. And trying again would mean risking the Tapu's wrath once more. So they leave the ruins standing. They leave them as a warning, a memorial, a constant visible reminder that this is what happens when you forget your place. And that's the tragedy of Alola. It's not that the people are oppressed by evil rulers or tyrannical governments. It's that they're oppressed by the very things that keep them safe. The Tapu protect Alola from external threats. They fought the Ultra Beasts. They drove back Necrozma. Without them, the region would have been destroyed long ago, but their protection comes at a cost that the people have no choice but to pay. They can't leave. Where would they go? The Tapu are part of the land itself, woven into the fabric of the islands. You can't escape them any more than you can escape the ocean or the sky. So you adapt. You learn to live with the fear. You teach your children the rules, the rituals, the prayers. You hope they'll be smarter than you were, more careful, more respectful. You hope they'll survive. And when they have children of their own, you pass the burden on to the next generation. 'Cause that's what it means to live in Alola. That's what it means to share your home with gods. The Tapu are not your friends. They are not your guardians in any compassionate sense. They are the price you pay for living in paradise. They are the darkness that lurks beneath the sunshine. They are the reminder that nature, for all its beauty, is fundamentally hostile to human life. And they will never leave. They will never change. They will always be there, watching, waiting, judging. And all you can do is hope that when they finally turn their gaze on you, they find you entertaining enough to keep alive. That's the folk horror of Alola. Not monsters in the shadows, but gods in the light. Not a threat that can be defeated, but a reality that must be endured. The sun always shines, the water is always crystal blue, the festivals are always joyful, and underneath it all, there's a prayer on everyone's lips, repeated so often it's become as natural as breathing. A prayer that never changes, because it's the only one that matters. Please don't notice me. Please don't be angry. Please let me live another day. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, the Tapu listen, but don't count on it. Now, before I wrap up this section, I want you to think about something. Think about your own playthrough of Sun and Moon. Think about how you felt when you first encountered the Tapu. Were you excited? Did you see them as cool, legendary Pokemon to add to your collection? Did you feel powerful when you caught them, like you'd conquered something significant? Now think about what I've just told you. Think about the lore, the implications, the environmental storytelling. Think about Tapu Village and the thrifty Megamart and the mist and the scales and the hair trigger temper. And ask yourself, did you really catch them? Or did they let you catch them because they were curious about you? Because they wanted to see what you would do with their power? Because they were bored and you look like a fun distraction? And what happens when the game ends? What happens when you turn off your console and the Tapu are left in your PC box, suspended in digital amber? Do they rage against their imprisonment? Do they plot revenge, or do they simply wait, patient and eternal, knowing that you'll come back eventually, knowing that everyone always comes back? That's the brilliance of the Tapu as antagonists in a folk horror narrative. They're not trying to kill you. They're not scheming to destroy the world. They're just existing, being what they are. And what they are is fundamentally incompatible with human safety. You can't defeat them because they're not attackable. You can't escape them because they're everywhere. You can't reason with them because they don't think like you do. All you can do is navigate around them like sailors avoiding rocks in a storm, and hope that the storm doesn't decide to chase you. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's this. Alola is not safe. It never was. The tropical paradise, the friendly locals, the fun island challenge, all of it is a facade. Not a lie exactly. More like a coping mechanism. A way of pretending that everything is fine so you can get through the day without going insane from fear. Because if you really sat down and thought about what it means to live in Alola, if you really confronted the reality of the Tapu and what they represent, you'd never sleep again. The people of Alola know this. They live with it every day, and they've chosen to keep smiling, keep celebrating, keep welcoming tourists and trainers and adventurers. Because what else can they do? Give up? Leave? Abandon the islands they love? No. They stay. They endure. They pray. And they teach the next generation to do the same. That's not courage. That's not strength. That's survival. And survival, in Alola, means accepting that you're living on borrowed time. That every day you wake up is a gift from the Tapu, and that gift can be revoked at any moment for any reason, or no reason at all. Because the Tapu don't need reasons, they're gods, and gods do what they want. Let's talk about something the games mention but never fully explore. The wars, the ancient conflicts between the islands. Because Alola wasn't always 4 separate islands working together. There was a time when each island had its own king, its own army, and its own ambitions. And the Tapu weren't just guardians, they were generals. According to the lore, each Tapu served as the leader of an island's army. Can you imagine that? Can you picture Tapu Koko leading soldiers into battle, its electric power ripping through enemy lines? Tapu Lele, scattering its scales over wounded warriors, healing allies while condemning enemies to death by overstimulation. Tapu Bulu, uprooting entire forests and hurling them at opposing forces. Tapu Fini, creating walls of mist so thick that armies wandered blindly until they starved or turned on each other. The lore tells us that these battles caused great destruction to the islands, that the Z-power unleashed by the Tapu during warfare was so devastating that they eventually stopped being involved in human affairs. But think about what that means. Think about the level of destruction required to make immortal gods decide that warfare was too much even for them. We're talking about landscapes reshaped, entire populations wiped out, forests burned, coastlines shattered, the kind of apocalyptic devastation that leaves scars on the land for generations. And the Tapu did this, not reluctantly, not as a last resort. They led these armies. They fought these wars. They used their divine power to slaughter humans by the thousands. And then, when the dust settled and they looked at what they'd done, they didn't feel guilty. They didn't seek redemption. They just decided it wasn't fun anymore. The destruction they'd caused was inconvenient to them, disrupting the islands they were supposed to protect. So they stopped. Not because killing was wrong, not because they valued human life, but because the wars were damaging their territory. Think about that for a moment. The Tapu have the capacity and the willingness to engage in mass slaughter. They've done it before. They could do it again. The only reason they don't is because they've chosen not to, for now. But that choice could change at any moment. If the islands went to war again, if the Kahunas failed to maintain peace, if someone did something that made the Tapu decide that direct intervention was necessary, they would absolutely return to warfare. And this time, they'd have centuries of pent-up boredom and curiosity to work through. The Battle Royal format that's so popular in Alola, that's not just a fun battle style that Game Freak invented. It's explicitly stated in the lore that the Battle Royal format was created as a result of the Tapu occasionally fighting each other to see who was strongest. 4 combatants enter an arena. Everyone fights everyone else. Last one standing wins. It's a direct simulation of divine combat, turned into entertainment for humans. The people of Alola took the most terrifying thing they'd ever witnessed, their guardian deities trying to kill each other, and made it into a sport. That's not just coping, that's ritualization of trauma. It's taking something horrific and transforming it into something controlled, something predictable, something that happens in an arena with rules instead of on a battlefield with no survivors. The Battle Royal format is Alola's way of saying, remember when the gods fought and nearly destroyed us all? Let's do that again, but safely. It's gallows humor on a cultural scale, and the Tapu watch these battle royals. They attend them. They're entertained by watching humans simulate divine violence. Does that seem healthy to you? Does that seem like the behavior of benevolent protectors? Or does it seem like the Tapu are narcissists who enjoy watching humans play act their godhood, who find it amusing that their most traumatic displays of power have been turned into a spectator sport? There's something deeply unsettling about the idea that the Tapu's fighting is so legendary, so ingrained in Alolan culture, that it's become the basis for an entire battle format. It means the wars weren't just ancient history, they're living memory. The destruction was so profound, so visceral, that it shaped how Alolans think about combat itself. Every battle royal is a reminder. Every four-way fight is an echo of the day the gods decided to test their strength against each other and nearly ended civilization in the process. And here's the terrifying part. The lore says they fight occasionally to see who's strongest. Occasionally, present tense, meaning this still happens. The Tapu still to this day engage in territorial disputes or dominance contests. They still fight each other, and when they do, the people of Alola can only watch and pray that the collateral damage won't be too severe, that the battle will happen somewhere remote, that it will end quickly, that their island won't be the one where two gods decide to settle their differences. You want to know why the population of Tapu Village is 13 people? It's not just because Tapu Bulu destroyed it once. It's because everyone knows it could happen again. To any village, on any island, for any reason. The Tapu are not static. They're not predictable. They're active participants in the world, with wants and desires and conflicts of their own. And humans are just background noise in their drama. Now let's discuss the Ultra Beasts. Because when those dimensional invaders started pouring through wormholes into Alola, something interesting happened. The Tapu fought them. The games show you this explicitly. In Sun and Moon, when Lucamine opens multiple Ultra wormholes during the climax, each Tapu appears on its respective island to fight back the invasion. Tapu Koko fights Buzzwole or Pheromosa. Tapu Lele defends against Xurkitree. Tapu Bulu confronts Celesteela or Kartana. Tapu Fini battles Guzzlord. They protect their islands from extra-dimensional threats. This should be reassuring, right? This should prove that the Tapu are genuine protectors, that they care about Alola and its people. And on the surface, it does. The Tapu absolutely defend their territory from invaders. But let's dig deeper. Let's ask why they fight the Ultra Beasts. Is it because they care about the humans who live there? Or is it because the Ultra Beasts are trespassing on their territory? The Tapu are territorial. Extremely territorial. Tapu Bulu destroyed an entire village because a building was constructed on ground it considered sacred. Do you really think the Tapu would tolerate alien creatures invading their islands, disrupting their environments, challenging their dominance? The Ultra Beasts aren't just threats to humans, they're insults to the Tapu's authority. They're competitors, rivals, intruders who need to be driven off, not because they're dangerous to people, but because they're disrespectful to the gods. Think about it from the Tapu's perspective. You've guarded these islands for centuries. You've established yourself as the apex predator, the ultimate authority. And then these bizarre, impossible creatures start showing up, claiming territory, causing chaos. They don't pray to you. They don't respect you. They don't even acknowledge your existence. They just do whatever they want. From the Tapu's perspective, the Ultra Beasts are an affront, a challenge that must be answered with overwhelming force. The people of Alola benefit from this, of course. The Tapu's territorial nature means they'll fight off invaders, but make no mistake, they're not fighting for you. They're fighting for themselves. You're just lucky that your survival aligns with their interests. And if that alignment ever changed, if the Tapu decided that humans were more trouble than Ultra Beasts, if they concluded that the constant need to defend against dimensional incursions was exhausting, and the easiest solution would be to just let the humans get wiped out, what do you think would happen? There's a moment in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon where Necrozma opens ultra wormholes across Alola. The Tapu respond immediately, rushing to defend their islands. But watch that scene carefully. Watch how they move, how they position themselves. They're not protecting the people, they're protecting the territory. The humans just happen to be on that territory. It's a subtle distinction, but it's important, because it means that the Tapu's protection is conditional on you being useful, or at least not being a problem. The moment you become more trouble than you're worth, that protection vanishes. And let's talk about Necrozma specifically, the blinding one, the creature that absorbs light, that consumed an entire dimension's sun, that required the combined power of the legendary Pokemon Solgaleo or Lunala to even slow down. The Tapu fought Necrozma. They fought it to a standstill. They actually managed to drive it back. That's incredible. That's evidence of truly godlike power. But it also means the Tapu have experienced a threat greater than themselves. They've faced something that genuinely challenged them, that made them struggle, that forced them to work together to survive. And they remember that. They remember what it felt like to be vulnerable, to be in danger. And that memory, that knowledge that something out there can hurt them, that makes them more dangerous, not less. Because now the Tapu know they're not invincible. They know that threats exist that could kill them. And when gods become afraid, when they realize their mortality, they become paranoid, aggressive. They start seeing threats everywhere. They start preemptively eliminating anything that might possibly pose a danger to them. And humans, with our technology, our ambition, our tendency to build things and change things and push boundaries, we could very easily become threats in the Tapu's eyes. What do you think happens to a region when its guardian deities decide that the people they're supposed to protect have become potential enemies? You get Tapu Village, you get the thrifty Megamart, you get inexplicable disappearances and unexplained tragedies, and a population that lives in constant, low-level terror because they know that one wrong move could make them targets. The Ultra Beast crisis should have been a wake-up call for Alola. It should have made people realize how vulnerable they are, how dependent on the Tapu's goodwill. But instead, it reinforced the status quo. The Tapu fought off the invaders, proving they're still powerful, still in control. And the people of Alola breathed a sigh of relief and went back to their prayers and offerings and desperate attempts to stay beneath notice. Because what else could they do? You can't fight the Tapu, you can't reason with them, you can't escape them. Your only option is to hope that they continue to see you as part of their territory rather than a threat to it. And that hope is a thin, fragile thing, easily broken by something as simple as building a supermarket in the wrong place. Let's talk about the ruins themselves, the ruins of conflict, life, abundance, and hope. These aren't just ancient structures, they're active places of worship, shrines where the Tapu reside and where people come to offer prayers. but look at what they represent: conflict, life, abundance, hope. These are the 4 stages of human existence, filtered through the lens of divine oversight. The ruins of conflict are where life is tested, where you prove your worth through battle, where the strong survive and the weak perish. That's Tapu Koko's domain, a philosophy of constant struggle, of violence as a test of character. You're only worthy if you can fight, if you can win, if you can survive Tapu Koko's attention without being destroyed by its hair-trigger temper. This isn't a healthy worldview. This is social Darwinism elevated to religious doctrine. The strong deserve to live, the weak deserve to die. And Tapu Koko enforces this with electric fury. The ruins of life are where existence begins, where Tapu Lele governs birth, growth, healing. But we've already discussed the dark side of Tapu Lele's healing. This isn't the nurturing, protective energy of motherhood. This is life as an uncontrollable force, as something that can heal you or kill you with equal ease. Life in Tapu Lele's domain is chaotic, cruel, indifferent. You might be born healthy or sick. You might grow strong or weak. You might be healed or destroyed. And Tapu Lele will laugh either way because it doesn't understand the difference. Life to Tapu Lele is just a game. The ruins of abundance are where life flourishes, where Tapu Bulu presides over growth, harvest, prosperity. But abundance isn't guaranteed. It's conditional. You have to respect the land. You have to follow the rules. You have to stay on Tapu Bulu's good side. And if you don't, if you take too much, or build in the wrong place, or disturb what Tapu Bulu has decided is sacred, the abundance turns to destruction. The god of prosperity becomes the god of ruin. The bull that provides becomes the bull that gores. And finally, the ruins of hope are where life ends, where Tapu Fini waits at the threshold between the living world and the dead. Hope, in this context, is the hope for a peaceful death, for a gentle transition. But even that isn't guaranteed. Tapu Fini's mist can trap you between worlds, showing you the dead you've lost and tormenting you with the impossibility of reunion. Hope becomes despair, the end becomes endless, and Tapu Fini watches, aloof and disgusted, as you tear yourself apart with grief. These 4 stages, these 4 philosophies, form the basis of Alolan spirituality. Life is conflict, birth is chaos, growth is conditional, death is uncertain. That's what the Tapu teach. That's what the ruins represent. It's a worldview defined by divine caprice, where nothing is guaranteed and everything depends on the whims of beings who don't think like you do and don't care about your suffering. And the people of Alola have internalized this. They've built their entire culture around these principles. The island challenge, with its trials and grand battles, is a direct reflection of the ruins of conflict you prove yourself through combat. The emphasis on family and community, on taking care of each other, reflects the chaotic nature of the ruins of life. You support each other because you can't rely on divine mercy. The agricultural festivals and harvest celebrations reflect the conditional abundance of the ruins of abundance. You give thanks because you know it could all be taken away tomorrow. And the reverence for ancestors, the emphasis on remembering the dead, reflects the uncertain hope of the ruins of hope. You honor the dead because you know you'll join them eventually, and you want someone to remember you too. This isn't just mythology, this is practical theology. This is a religion built not on faith or love, but on survival. Every ritual, every tradition, every prayer is designed to keep the Tapu appeased, to maintain the delicate balance that allows humans to exist on these islands. and that balance is always one bad day away from shattering. Now here's something that doesn't get talked about enough: the Z moves. These spectacular, powerful attacks that trainers can unleash once per battle. They're presented as the ultimate expression of the bond between trainer and Pokemon, a crystallization of trust and determination. But where does the power come from? From the Tapu. Every Z move channels the divine energy of the Guardian Deities. Every time you use a Z move, you're borrowing power from gods. And borrowing implies debt, implies obligation, implies that at some point, payment will be expected. The games don't address this. They can't, because it would undermine the power fantasy that Pokemon games are built on. But in a world where the Tapu are real, where they're active and capricious and dangerous, the idea that they're just handing out power with no strings attached is absurd. Think about it. The Z-rings are made from sparkling stones given by the Tapu. The Z-crystals themselves are manifestations of the Tapu's power. When you perform a Z move, you're essentially invoking the Tapu's name, calling on their strength, using their energy. That's not a gift, that's a contract. And like all contracts with divine beings, the terms are probably not in your favor. What happens if you use a Z move and the Tapu decides you used it wrong? What if you use electric type Z moves powered by Tapu Koko's energy to attack something Tapu Koko likes? What if you use psychic type moves from Tapu Lele in a way that amuses you but annoys it? What if you draw on Tapu Bulu's grass power to destroy plants? What if you channel Tapu Fini's water in a way that disrespects the dead? The games can't show you the consequences because they have to maintain the power fantasy. But in a realistic Alolan setting, using Z moves would be terrifying. Every time you draw on that power, you're gambling that the Tapu won't take offense, that they won't see your use of their energy as presumptuous or disrespectful or simply boring. And if they do, if they decide that you've misused their gift, well, we know what the Tapu do to people who displease them. There's a reason the Island Challenge exists, a reason trainers have to complete trials and defeat Kahunas before they can use Z moves. It's not just to prove strength, it's to prove worthiness, to demonstrate that you understand the weight of what you're wielding, that you respect the power you're borrowing, that you won't take the Tapu's gifts for granted. The Island Challenge is a prolonged test, a series of opportunities for the Tapu to observe you and decide whether you deserve their power. And if you fail, if you prove yourself unworthy, the Z-ring doesn't just stop working, you become marked, identified as someone who asked for divine power and couldn't handle it. And the Tapu have long memories. Every trial captain, every Kahuna, every character who's involved in the Island Challenge is part of this system. They're gatekeepers, making sure that only those who truly understand what they're asking for gain access to Z moves. And even then, even after you've proven yourself, the power isn't really yours. It belongs to the Tapu. You're just permitted to use it for now, as long as they find you interesting, as long as you don't disappoint them. This recontextualizes every Z move you use in the games. That devastating Drake that obliterates your opponent, that's Tapu Koko's electric fury channeled through your Pokemon. That Bloom Doom that turns the battlefield into a garden, that's Tapu Bulu's plant manipulation, borrowed and unleashed. You're not just using a powerful attack, you're invoking a god, and gods always remember who invokes them, always remember who uses their power, always remember who owes them. Let me tell you about something else the games gloss over: the relationship between the Kahunas and the Tapu. We know that each Kahuna is chosen by their respective Tapu, Hala by Tapu Koko. Olivia by Tapu Lele, Nanu by Tapu Bulu, Hapu by Tapu Fini. But what does it mean to be chosen? What does that process look like? Because I guarantee it's not a friendly conversation where the Tapu politely asks if you'd like the job. Look at Nanu. He's bitter, exhausted, clearly doesn't want to be Kahuna. He's described as lazy, as someone who does the bare minimum to fulfill his duties. And yet he was chosen by Tapu Bulu. Why? Because Tapu Bulu is also lazy. Because Tapu Bulu saw something in Nanu that resonated with its own nature. But here's the thing. Nanu can't quit. He can't retire. He can't hand the responsibility to someone else. Because being chosen by a Tapu isn't an honor you can decline. It's a sentence you serve until you die. Think about that. Imagine being selected by a capricious god to serve as the intermediary between that god and your entire island. Imagine knowing that every decision you make, every action you take, every moment of your life will be scrutinized by a being that could kill you for disappointing it. Imagine living with that pressure every single day, knowing that you didn't choose this, that you were chosen, and that there's no way out except death. That's what being a Kahuna means. That's the reality behind the title. And the people of Alola see the Kahunas as leaders, as figures to be respected and obeyed. But the Kahunas themselves, they know their sacrifices, their offerings to keep the Tapu engaged, to give the gods someone to focus on besides the general population. Their lightning rods drawing divine attention to themselves so that everyone else can live in relative peace. And what happens when a Kahuna dies, when the position becomes vacant? The Tapu chooses someone new, immediately. There's no democratic process, no consideration of who would be best for the job. The Tapu just picks someone, usually at the worst possible time, and that person's life is over. Not literally, but functionally, because from that moment on, they belong to the Tapu. Their wants, their dreams, their personal desires, none of it matters anymore. They're the Kahuna, and the Kahuna's only purpose is to serve. We see this with Hapu. She's just a kid when Tapu Fini chooses her. She hasn't even finished grieving for her grandfather, the previous Kahuna, when the mantle is thrust upon her, and everyone celebrates. They're happy for her. They congratulate her. But Hapu looks terrified, because she understands what this means. She's been watching her grandfather struggle under the weight of this responsibility her entire life. She knows what being Kahuna costs, and now it's her turn, and she has no choice but to accept. That's not destiny. That's trauma. That's a child being forced into a role she never wanted because a god found her interesting. And the worst part, the people of Pony Island see this as a good thing, as an honor, as proof that Tapu Fini favors them. They don't see the terror in Hapu's eyes. Or maybe they do, and they're just grateful it's her instead of them. Because that's the other layer of this horror. The relief that comes with someone else being chosen, the quiet, guilty satisfaction that the divine spotlight has focused on another target. When a new Kahuna is appointed, the rest of the island breathes easier, not because they have a strong leader, but because the Tapu has found someone new to watch, someone new to test, someone new to possibly destroy if they fail to meet expectations. And for a little while, everyone else gets to fade into the background and just survive. This is what I mean when I say Alola operates on fear. Not the obvious, screaming in your face kind of fear. The subtle, insidious kind. The kind that makes you feel grateful when someone else becomes the sacrifice. The kind that makes you smile and wave at the tourists while praying they leave before something bad happens. The kind that makes you tell your children bedtime stories about the wonderful guardian deities who protect the islands, while carefully editing out the parts about crushed villages and deadly scales and mist that steals your soul. The truth of Alola is written in the spaces between words, in what people don't say, in the ruins that never get rebuilt, in the population of 13 living in a ghost town, in the Kahunas who look exhausted and bitter and afraid, in the ghost types that haunt a supermarket that shouldn't have been built, in the mist that sometimes rolls in from Pony Island and makes people disappear, in the festivals that feel more like appeasement rituals than celebrations. The truth is that Alola is beautiful because beauty is required, because the Tapu prefer it that way, because a thriving, prosperous region is more interesting to watch than a wasteland. The people maintain the paradise not for themselves, but for the gods. They smile not from joy, but from necessity. They celebrate not because they're happy, but because joy is expected, because contentment is demanded, because the alternative, admitting that they're terrified, that they're trapped, that they're living at the mercy of beings who could annihilate them for entertainment, would make the terror too real to bear. So they pretend, they perform, they play their roles in a theater where the audience is four immortal deities who get bored easily and express their displeasure through casual mass murder. And they teach their children to play the same roles, to wear the same masks, to perform the same rituals. Generation after generation, the performance continues, because stopping would mean acknowledging the truth, and the truth would break them. There's one more thing I want to talk about before we wrap this up. The player character. You. When you play Pokemon Sun and Moon, you're not from Alola. You've just moved there from Kanto. You're an outsider. Someone who doesn't understand the rules yet. Someone who doesn't know how to be afraid of the right things. And that makes you incredibly dangerous. Not to the Tapu, but to everyone around you. Because when you stumble onto that bridge and fall, Tapu Koko saves you. And everyone who hears about it understands what that means. Tapu Koko has noticed you. It finds you interesting. It's chosen to interact with you directly. And for the people of Alola, that's not a blessing, that's a warning. Because when the Tapu notice someone, when they start paying attention, bad things happen. Maybe not immediately, maybe not obviously, but eventually the attention becomes too much. The expectations become impossible to meet, and the person breaks under the weight of divine scrutiny. But you don't know that. You're excited. You've been saved by a legendary Pokemon. You've been given a Z-Ring. You're special, chosen, and you barrel through the island challenge with the confidence of someone who doesn't understand what they're dealing with. You battle the trails. You defeat the Kahunas. You catch the Tapu themselves if you're strong enough. And everyone around you watches with a mixture of admiration and horror, because they know something you don't. They know that everything you're doing, every success you achieve, every goal you accomplish, it's only happening because the Tapu are letting it happen, because they're entertained by you. And when they stop being entertained, when you've served your purpose, when the story ends and the credits roll and there's nothing left for you to do, what happens to the chosen one then? What happens to the outsider who caught the gods' attention and then became boring? The games don't tell you. They can't. Because the answer would ruin the power fantasy. But in a realistic Alola, in a world where the Tapu are what the lore says they are, the player character's story doesn't have a happy ending. It has a quiet disappearance, a mysterious accident, a sudden illness that no one can explain. because the Tapu don't like loose ends, and a former champion who knows too much, who's seen too much, who's powerful enough to potentially become a threat, that's a loose end. This is pure speculation, of course. The games would never go there. But it fits the pattern, doesn't it? It fits with everything else we know about the Tapu, their capriciousness, their cruelty, their view of humans as entertainment rather than individuals deserving of respect. A player character who served their purpose is just another toy that's outlived its usefulness. And the Tapu have very little patience for useless things. Maybe that's too dark. Maybe I'm reading too much into the implications. But here's the thing about folk horror. It thrives in the gaps, in the things that aren't said, in the logical endpoints of established rules. The Tapu are capricious and cruel. The people of Alola live in fear. The Kahunas are chosen against their will. The ruins stand as monuments to divine violence. Put all of that together, and the only logical conclusion is that Alola is a beautiful cage, a paradise prison where the inmates have learned to love their captors because the alternative is unthinkable. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's just how life works in a world where gods are real and active and fundamentally alien to human morality. Maybe the people of Alola have found a way to make peace with their situation, to build meaningful lives despite the constant threat hanging over them. Maybe they're genuinely happy in their own way, even as they perform their rituals and say their prayers and avoid building on sacred ground. Or maybe they're waiting, hoping, praying that someday something will change, that the Tapu will lose interest and leave, that the burden will be lifted, that they'll be free, but knowing deep in their hearts that freedom is impossible, because the Tapu are part of Alola. They're woven into the islands themselves, into the rocks and the trees and the ocean. You can't separate Alola from the Tapu any more than you can separate a body from its shadow. They're eternal, unchanging, forever. And the people are temporary, fragile, replaceable. If every human in Alola vanished tomorrow, the Tapu would barely notice. They'd just wait for new ones to arrive, to settle, to build their civilizations and offer their prayers. And the cycle would begin again. Fear disguised as worship, survival disguised as tradition, performance disguised as culture, forever and ever until the islands themselves sink beneath the waves. That's the horror of Alola, not that the Tapu are evil, but that they're indifferent, and indifference from beings with the power to reshape reality is far more terrifying than malice could ever be. Because you can't fight indifference, you can't negotiate with it, you can't change it, you can only endure it, and hope that when the gods finally turn their gaze on you, they're in a good mood. So the next time you play Pokemon Sun and Moon, pay attention. Look at the faces of the NPCs. Listen to what they say and what they don't say. Notice how quickly they change the subject when you ask about the Tapu. Watch how the Kahunas carry themselves, how heavy their shoulders, or how tired their eyes look. Visit Tapu Village and really see the ruins. Walk through the thrifty megamart and feel the weight of all those ghosts. Stand in the mist on Pony Island and imagine what it would be like to see everyone you've ever lost, knowing you can never reach them. The game wants you to see a tropical paradise, a fun adventure, a region of friendly people and exciting challenges. And on the surface, that's what Alola is. But underneath, there's a quiet desperation, a constant vigilance, a fear so deeply ingrained that it's become invisible. The people of Alola have learned to smile through their terror, to dance through their dread, to celebrate their captivity, because celebrating is better than acknowledging what they've lost. They've lost their freedom, their safety, their ability to live without divine oversight. They've given up so much to survive, and they'll keep giving, keep performing, keep pretending, because the alternative is extinction, because the Tapu are capricious, because nature is cruel, because old gods demand old sacrifices, and the people of Alola are all that's left to give. So they build their shrines, they hold their festivals, they complete their trials, they honor their Kahunas, they pray to the Tapu with desperate sincerity, asking for protection, for prosperity, for mercy. And sometimes when the gods are pleased, those prayers are answered. The crops grow, the storms pass, the ultra beasts are driven back. Life continues. But always, always, there's the knowledge that tomorrow could be different. That tomorrow, Tapu Koko might wake up in a bad mood and destroy a village. That tomorrow, Tapu Lele might scatter its scales and kill dozens in its ignorance. That tomorrow, Tapu Bulu might decide that another patch of ground is sacred and level everything built on it. That tomorrow, Tapu Fini might trap someone in the mist and never let them out. Tomorrow, the Tapu might remember that they're gods, and gods do what they want. That's the truth of Alola. The truth beneath the sunshine and the smiles and the cheerful music. The truth that no one talks about but everyone knows. The truth that shapes every decision, every tradition, every prayer. The truth that makes paradise into purgatory. The Tapu are not your friends. They never were. They're forces of nature wearing masks of consciousness, playing at protection while remaining fundamentally indifferent to individual suffering. They're old gods in a modern world, anachronisms that refuse to fade, reminders that humanity's dominance over the natural world is an illusion. In Alola, nature still has teeth, still has claws, still has the power to destroy everything humans have built on a whim. And the people just survive. They adapt, they endure, they pass their trauma down through generations, disguised as tradition. They teach their children to fear the right things, to respect the boundaries, to never ever forget that the beautiful islands they call home are also a prison guarded by capricious, immortal wardens who could decide at any moment that the sentence has changed from life imprisonment to death penalty. That's folk horror. That's what makes the Tapu so terrifying once you peel back the cheerful veneer of the Pokemon games. They're not monsters you can fight. They're not villains you can defeat. They're the price of living in paradise. And that price, paid in blood and fear and desperate worship, never goes down. It only increases. Generation after generation, the debt grows larger. And the people of Alola, trapped between the beauty of their home and the horror of its guardians, can only smile and pray that today isn't the day the bill comes due. So yeah, the Tapu, 4 guardian deities, protectors of Alola, worshipped by thousands, feared by all who truly understand them. They're not evil, they're not good. They're something far more ancient and far more terrible than human concepts of morality could ever encompass. Their nature-given consciousness, their beauty and horror intertwined so completely that you can't separate one from the other. And they're watching, always watching, waiting to see who will be interesting next, who will catch their attention, who will become the next story, the next game, the next sacrifice to divine boredom. Maybe it'll be you, maybe you'll visit Alola, maybe you'll catch Tapu Koko, or Tapu Lele, or Tapu Bulu, or Tapu Fini. Maybe you'll add them to your team and use their power and feel special. And maybe, in that moment, you'll understand what the people of Alola have always known, that when a god notices you, when it finds you interesting, when it chooses to interact with you, your life is no longer your own. You belong to it now, and you'll belong to it until it gets bored or you die, whichever comes first. Welcome to Alola. Paradise awaits. But remember to smile. Remember to bow your head at the shrines. Remember to never ever build on sacred ground, because the Tapu are watching, and they always will be. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you played Pokemon Sun and Moon? Did you catch the Tapu? What did you think of them? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to discuss this darker interpretation of Alola's guardians with you. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the folk horror lurking beneath Pokemon's sunny surface, hit that like button to help this video reach more people who appreciate these kinds of dark analyses. If you want more content like this, exploring the horror hidden in games you thought were innocent, consider subscribing. There's so much more darkness to uncover, and I'm just getting started. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, and remember, not all guardians guard you from danger. Sometimes they guard you from leaving.